Good day, everybody. I'm Rick Sterling, the president of Western IM, and I'd like to thank you all for being on our Whisper series this time, our new Whisper webinar series that we're into right now. I'd like to tell you that we will do the same format as we did last time. Troy Sawyer, who I'm just going to introduce in a moment here. Troy is going to do his thing, and then we're going to basically have a discussion about some of the things we've seen today in the webinar. As we did last time. Troy is one of my partners at Western IM, and he's also the architect and lead developer of the Whisper tool. So he's the guy you really want to hear from. Troy, take it away.
All right, thanks, Rick. Okay, so just to kind of start off, I know not everybody might have been in the first kind of two parts of the series. Not to worry too much, I'll just do a brief recap just to kind of go over what we'd seen in the
Troy, I can't actually see the...
Yeah, I haven't shared my screen yet.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I thought I'd just talk to what we did before here. So yeah, so like I'd mentioned, the first two parts we did, the first one where we did some initial setup where we looked at some data sources and looked at the kind of information that we're going to be looking at through this webinar series. Last one, we actually took some spreadsheets from our record center with some databases that we found some departments and things like that. We found some volumes on our SharePoint site, and we kind of set up all the relationships and stuff from those data sources. Now, to kind of continue from where we were, the idea of the data we got from the sources before, most of it was really structured, most of it in spreadsheets that were very organized. We had columns and rows with headers, there were databases, there were SharePoint lists with columns. So what we're going to do in this part three, is actually look at things that aren't quite so structured and how we can add value to those. In particular, we'll be looking at some shared drives. I've got a SharePoint site here, but the key is that we're going to keep building on what we've done before. We have our departments, we have personnel, we have our company, all that kind of stuff. We have some boxes and volumes. How can we build on what we've already done? So let me share my screen here. So this is kind of where we've gotten to. I won't go back to the data sources, but essentially what we found so far is our departments, and then within these departments, we found some boxes and things like that. But we're going to continue from here and start putting in these other pieces of information out on our shared drive and our SharePoint site. So let me open up a couple of areas here. I'm just going to go into, this is just our NAS here, and I've got some sample documents here. I like to use this for a demo because it is very unstructured. Within here, I have a couple of different folder structures we'll look at as part of some of the content that's going to come in today. But for the most part, we have chat logs and contracts and things from projects and stuff all over the place here. So this is kind of what we see is a very good indication of what people have on kind of content stores, shared drives, SharePoint sites. The other thing we'll also look at is an actual SharePoint site. I've got a SharePoint site here. This will be one of our sources. I'll keep referring to sources, but when I say that, essentially what I'm saying is, where is that data coming from? I call it an electronic profile, and they become sources of our information in Whisper. So this is just a SharePoint site that's got some documents on it. Same idea, not very structured, and kind of documents all over the place in the shared drive here. So I'm going to hop back into Whisper. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things on terms of what we had last time and what we have here. I try not to add too much, but I did run a sync for that larger shared drive location, so we don't have to run it during this webinar, but we'll find another area we'll actually run a sync. So I've got a couple of extra tabs here as well. We'll kind of go through these, but I'll hop over to my electronic tab here. And essentially what you're looking at here is the left-hand side are our sources. These are a live view into the shared drive, into the SharePoint site. If I expand this, this is actually what's there. I can, right click and open these files right from Whisper if I wanted. I can navigate to the SharePoint sites. Here, I'll just expand the SharePoint site. Oh, gotta load up. So here's that live view into the SharePoint site. A lot of people like using this just for the simple fact you get a tree view of your SharePoint site, which seems like something that's kind of missing from the SharePoint interface. But here, this is just a tree view of that SharePoint site. So what we're seeing here is a lot of unstructured data. So how can we kind of add value to this? So I'm just going to close this down here. And what I've done is on my right-hand side, just like we had on our functional view of the information we brought in before, where we had our company, and within the company, we had our departments. This is kind of the structure that I want to massage our shared drives into. Now, again, Whisper is very passive. We haven't brought documents in here. This document still lives out on the shared drive. In the last part, we'll actually show how we can use what we do today to get a new structure exported out to shared drives or SharePoint sites. We'll do that in the last webinar, but today we'll just look at taking what we've got and try to put it alongside that structure we've started building from previous ones. So here you can see I've got my departments, and from here, I've already run the sync on this one. I think there's about 2,000 documents in here. And what I can do is I can start clicking on a document here, and I can see as part of that sync where it ended up in my new structure. So it's kind of a left-hand side, right-hand side view of things. I'll just collapse this down here so we can see everything. So I've got a lot of stuff under my unknown. The way this has been set up is that anything that basically the rules that we applied to it couldn't put it into a department fall out to an unknown department. So I've got a lot of stuff here that kind of fell out to the unknown area. And this is kind of where maybe we don't know what it is. Maybe we have to go to subject matter experts, you know, who created this content to figure out where it might fall into it. I'll do some manual reorganization of this area, but what I want to kind of focus on is that I've actually got part of my folder structure here that has departments kind of already laid out in the folder structure. I'm not going to go too deep into the data engine rule that happens behind the scenes. Next week when we look at email, we'll make some more elaborate rules when we sync in some email. But essentially what I've done here is I said, anytime you find a department name in one of the folder paths or file names, that means it's from that department. So as part of this kind of shared drive, I found part that actually says accounts payable. So what Whisper has done here, if I actually click on accounts payable, you can see under the Western IM accounts payable, all of my accounts payable documents are showing up. So it's a simple, this is just kind of the simplest rule that we can do here. It's basically, hey, if you find something that matches something in our system, name-wise in this case, assume that it's linked to that and do that linking for us. So we're getting a live view of our shared drive. Documents are still there. If I open up this folder on the shared drive, I'm still in that shared drive location, but within Whisper, we start getting a different hierarchical view of our information. So let's add to this. So I'd mentioned that there's a lot of things that came out of this sync that fell out to the unknown. I didn't find in a department named in the file path. So let's start dealing with some of these other ones here. So let me find a folder here that's got a document in here. So if I click on this folder under my unknown, it shows me where it is on the shared drive. So it's one of the top level folders that just has one document in it on the shared drive. We can kind of build from those basic rules. We got a bunch of things that fell out. How can we put these in? We can actually just simply drag and drop. So under corporate finance here, let me find one that doesn't shared services. So this one doesn't actually have any folders underneath it. I'm going to say this one is actually underneath that one. So just part of the manual process, no matter how many rules you make when it comes to shared drive, especially ones badly organized like this one, you're always going to have stuff that kind of falls out. And this is just the simple way to kind of help reorganize it. So we're starting to build that new hierarchical view within Whisper, leaving the shared drive as it is, to kind of get a better view, add more metadata, create relationships. In this case, I went from company to department to the folder, but I could have also done a different kind of folder structure here. Maybe I want to see the company and the people and link the files because I created all these files, show me all the files that Troy created in an organization. So you're not limited by a rigid structure. You can have multiple different tabs that have different hierarchical structures to view the content differently. Find this comes in handy when we have different people in different positions wanting to see the same information in different ways. A records manager might have a hierarchical view that's driven from their classification. And then, front desk might need a view of that functional organization where we've got a primary and secondary, or a function and activity in a department. That's how they want to see the content. We can set it up this way that we can see that same information in different ways. So we used that kind of simple data rule to say, if you find that name, link it to that apartment. We can also do that with the classification as well. I just want to kind of hone in on a different part of my shared drive structure here. I can see that I've actually got a bunch of codes here that look like classification codes. So what I've done is actually created a classification in Whisper called COM04. So just like I linked the document to that department, I can also say, I found this classification. Let's also classify the content within that. So if I go down here and select one of these documents, let me double click and open it here. We can see that all these documents under the COM04. Yes, they didn't get anywhere in our functional organizational structure, but we did get the classification on it. So this is where we can kind of help put passive classification to unstructured data on the shared drive to start doing things like, hey, I want to start classifying that stuff because we know we've got stuff on there that's older than 7 years, for example. Start showing me stuff that's older than 7 years. So here I've applied the classification, and this classification is a 7 years. So from 10 years from today, because I just made this today, this is when I would expect the document to be ready to be disposed. Just want to jump and show you kind of what that looks like. Just here we're looking at hierarchical structures. So let's actually do a report on COM04. So I'm just going to hop over to my classification tab. We had looked in previous ones how we classified some of the boxes that came in from the spreadsheet, and we've got projected dates for those boxes. But let's actually just look at files. So I'm just going to filter down to files. So here we've got a couple of files here that looks like they've got really old. Oh yeah, there was no date on those, so we didn't get a correct projected date. But I want to look at classifications for just those COM04. So here we can see those 4 files that were on the drive now have a projected date of 2027. So if I put my projected date of like maybe in 2030, I come back to this, I can see that those 4 files on the drive are ready to go. So I hope we can see how we're kind of adding more and more value to that unstructured content in the shared drive. That also goes for a SharePoint site, just to kind of emphasize the SharePoint idea. Within my SharePoint site here, I have a corporate finance folder. And of course, corporate finance folder, or corporate finance is one of our departments. So I can see in that same structure, I'm seeing folders and files from the SharePoint site alongside the folders and files on the shared drive. Next week, we'll actually add email to this as well. Okay. So this is all kind of all good. Just want to highlight a couple of more tools to, again, add more value to unstructured content. One of the ones that comes up often is we've got that shared drive location. Show me everything that's duplicates. So we've got a duplicate checking here. This actually runs fairly quick because the data is not getting written to Whisper through the API. We're just looking at it and doing, we call it an MD5 hash to say the contents of these files. We didn't open it. We just did a system level MD5 hash of it. These 6 files are all the same. So they're grouped by the same ones. And you can see where they are on the drive here. If I minimize this here, you can see under that contracts folder, I have a whole bunch of the same contract. Somebody looks like they just copy pasted it, but there's the content of it is the same. But I've also got another one here in a different area. Some cases, it does make sense to have duplicates, especially on a shared drive where you can't link the same document to multiple locations like you can in a more advanced EDRMS system. But this gives you the kind of review area where you can say, show me what's duplicates. We do have the functionality in Whisper to clean up these duplicates. For anybody that's technical, essentially what we do is we decouple the duplicates from the folder structure and set them aside. We don't actually delete them so that we have a move and merge. So if we find that I have these 5 files checked when I hit move here, it's going to ask me for a location to put those documents aside. And then that can, if it was unintended, we can then merge them back together. So we kind of do a side-by-side separating, and then that move area with the duplicates can be handled kind of an IT way, not through Whisper. We do a disposition process kind of with the IT in a case like that. Okay, so let's kind of circle back around. I had mentioned just recently we posted a video. I did it yesterday. Something came up where somebody was asking about on-demand scanning. So I just wanted to kind of do a quick process where instead of linking it to department, we're actually going to find files that are electronic files that match the volumes in those boxes we got before, kind of marry up what we got from our SharePoint lists and spreadsheets from last week, and this week taking some of these electronic files and putting those together. So that what I've got is another tab here called physical scans. It's exactly like this tab. The only thing that's different is the right-hand side. As I'd mentioned, if we want to view content differently, this right-hand side is actually location, then boxes, then files, volumes within the box, and then show me the file that's associated with it. So what I've got is I've got a new area here. I ran this sync earlier, but if I open this up, we notice here that we've got kind of Rick's department. This will come back to Rick's department, but we also have contracts. And in contracts, this is where I'm putting my scans when I'm doing my scanning. This actual file name, just like we found the department name before, this file name is actually a volume within Whisper. So I've said, if you find that volume, link it to the volume, because that's the scanned version of it. So on my left-hand side, I've got my contracts out here and I've got my scan. But what I can see here is that the head office has a box, and in that box, there's a volume called 199 to 147. But then I can also see I have a file on the drive that matches that. That's the electronic version of it. Adding more value to it. We didn't just link it to a department. We could also link it to, maybe it had Troy in there and I link it to me. So let me open up this one. The video, I kind of demonstrated how we can send this out. So maybe somebody's requesting this information. We have a special control here where we have the path of where that file is. We can copy to clipboard or actually just put it directly into an email. So if somebody says, I needed that volume, especially today where we might not be able to pass out the physical information, we do a scan. That scan has, in this case, just the same file name. And from there I can say, well, instead of sending you the actual physical content, here's the scanned version of it. And then I instantly kind of send this out to Troy and as requested. And that sends them an attachment of the scan from the shared drive. And that document never came into Whisper. We had the reference to it from where it was being scanned to. We copy that, we attach that file to an email and we sent it out through an email. Great, so that kind of marries what we did last week and the previous weeks to this unstructured shared drive location. So I just want to do one more thing to kind of build on even further what we did last week, where we had all of our departments coming in from our database. That was a backend to whatever system we might have that had a list of our departments. I just noticed here that I've got a department that wasn't in that list. So I'm actually going to go back to my electronic tab and I'm going to say, okay, I found something in that source here that said Rick's department, but Rick's department didn't fall under Rick's department because we didn't have a Rick's department. We only had this list of departments, so it fell out to my unknown area. So instead of doing a manual process here where I drag and drop it into a new one, all I'm going to do here is create a new department, and I'm going to call it that same thing, Rick's department. And oh, we got to change this to department here. We're creating a department, give it a department ID, and I click new here. So now if I re-expand this here, I've got, oh, no, I didn't do it here. I've got to link it to the company. We're not in Western IM when I created that one. So we'll link it to Western IM here. This is company. We'll look that one up. We'll link it to it. So here now under, we've got Rick's department. Nothing's under there yet. But now that I have Rick's department and I run that sync here again, what I'll find is that that folder and all the files to it have now expanded into Rick's department, taken out of the unknown area and linked to Rick's department. Just trying to keep building as we kind of go through. Initially in part one, when we started looking at data sources, we didn't get all the information. We had a list of departments we thought was complete, but when we got to our shared drive, we found another department. Maybe this is a different shared drive, and all that content was related to a department we didn't have in our initial sources. So here's a way where we can kind of keep adding to what we saw in the first couple data sources that we had, in that case, the databases. So I've spent about 20 minutes here. I'll just hop over to one more thing here that I kind of wanted to show to add more value to that kind of unstructured content. What often happens is we have all these data sources And like I said, this is a shared drive that's out there. Users might still be using that today. So what I want to know is, I'm doing these things and I'm restructuring and put more metadata and classifying it. But when a new document's created, I want to know when new content is created. The same as if somebody starts deleting stuff off the shared drive, I want to know what's also been removed. I kind of want a snapshot of what's been added since the last time I ran this thing. So I'm going to look at my source control. I like to call it source control. Essentially, what source control is just that exact same tab configuration I had for the other two, where I'm seeing my data sources. But on the right, I said, show me all the files and folders in the system. But I added a new filtering mechanism here to say active, so that, okay, which source do I want to look at? So I'll select that shared drive sample here, and I want to see what's new. So from the last time I scanned, this is content that was created since the scan before last. So I synced it in, found this is what's new. Same as I want to see things that are removed. Here's a couple of documents that were removed. If I select this document, I can see here that folder used to have a file in it named this, and it took me to the folder to show me that this folder is missing this document. If I go back to the new here, if I click on the new one, it takes me, oh, look, this accounts payable started adding new documents into their accounts payable folder. Just a way to kind of add, this is very helpful actually when you're doing shared drive cleanup, to make sure that when we're getting close to actually doing the migration to the new shared drive structure, that we've made sure we've caught everything. This is handy to make sure that we have put out a new structure. Maybe it's on a SharePoint site and we have a folder structure, an accepted folder structure in our organization. Let's make sure people are filing to those and we don't have any new folders being created here that we don't want the users to be doing. Another way to kind of review that, our permissions are set. These are new files. I can go to those files and say, okay, well, who created this file? Are they supposed to have permissions to actually file to this location? So you can do a couple of things with this. So just to review, we started off from previous weeks where we had information that was structured in a way where we had our company and physical information in the departments, and now we've started added. And what I've done to this functional view is I've actually put side by side in the department. Now I can see company, department, and here I can see the folders and volume and boxes in that department. Maybe this structure should be a little bit more broken down, but this is kind of high level here. You can see in accounts payable, we have the electronic content right next to the physical content. So I can see that out in the shared drive, we've got some electronic content and they've got boxes, and I can see kind of where those boxes are. This box I selected here says it's in the head office. Just building a more complete view of our records and information within our organization, and also helping us do all those other processes that we might not have with our current systems, like doing classification, retention reporting, deduplication, and doing some reorganization to be able to help users in different positions view and access that kind of content that's more relevant to what they might be doing. So that's all I had for today. Next week, what we'll do is we'll dive into the data engine rule a little bit more. We'll look at email. So next week, we're going to be adding email from a mailbox, an Exchange folder, and doing something similar here, but we're going to be looking a little bit more specifically on not just, hey, if you find Western IM, link it to the Western IM company. We're going to be doing some more advanced things where it's like, who created that email? Where did it come from? And using other pieces of information that are more conditional to put email into our kind of structure that we've got being built here. Good. So Rick, you there? Yep.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Troy. Well, you just killed off a couple of things that have caused me a lot of pain over the last 20 years, Troy, with some of those features in Whisper. One of them is that whole kind of concept of seeing things that are new in a drive. Like, that's one of the things that the records management professionals have always had an issue with, because they're trying to do a cleanup on a shared drive. And meanwhile, they've got a new structure they're trying to educate users to use and all that kind of thing. And then they find one business unit out there that actually goes and builds a whole new structure and starts putting things in there again, but they didn't even know it was happening. So this way, they can actually monitor and see what's going on, and just make sure that everybody's kind of moving in a consistent direction. The other thing that was really cool, I thought, during the presentation was that whole concept of timing. And I keep talking about that every week. Timing's never right to do these kinds of jobs, because it doesn't happen in a minute. It doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't happen even in a month. Sometimes it takes months and months to get this stuff to happen. And it's like, okay, I need to do a classification system, and I need to do a retention schedule, and I need to educate the users, and I need to do this, and I need to do that. And the timing's never right. But Whisper kind of gives you that ability to take that whole timing thing out of the equation, because we're not changing the user's look and feel until we're ready to do that, right?
Yeah, and in the last one, we'll actually do that kind of reorganization. We'll take what we've got and put it out to and see what it looks like on the other end. But yeah, that's definitely the case, is that we're trying to give people tools to not only, get some work done, because, putting in a system that does all those things right from the beginning, that's a huge undertaking. If we can kind of break it out into this, okay, we've looked at different sources, and we've looked at, maybe we do shared drive, and maybe we do shared point separately, and all that kind of stuff. This kind of gives you that breakdown that helps you address timing issues for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the kind of downfalls of a whole information governance program in the first place, is the user. We don't want a user rebellion on our hands. And the other thing, Troy, is I want you to speak a little bit to this, because I think this is kind of an important, it just came to me today in past experiences where we had like a CEO's office with executive assistants and things like that worked with the C-level folks in the organization. And they don't really want to change the way they do things. I mean, they're used to doing whatever they do, and they don't really want us to change their view of the world, really. But we may have to change their view of the world in terms of classification and retention and all that stuff. So we could literally work in our own kind of vision of what that should look like, and leave them alone on their own portion of a shared drive to do what it is they do now. Is that right?
Yeah, very much. So in cases where we want people to continue doing the work they're doing today, we can still have these tools, and people do what they do. Exactly, just that, is that maybe we don't want to move to an EDRMS system that, their OneDrive, for example, that source could have been a OneDrive. We can still do things like classification on it to make sure that one thing that came up recently that we talked about earlier was the idea that, hey, I just want all the content in this transitory location to only exist for 7 years, for example. So similar to what I showed on the idea, okay, this unknown area that kind of fell out, the fact that it's unknown or unclassified in some cases doesn't mean that it's unclassified. That just means it doesn't fall into all the other ones, and therefore that's what this content is. So we can say, hey, by default on that shared drive, unless I tell you otherwise, or it has COM04, all the content that comes from that shared drive, put a classification on it of 7 years, so that we still retain control over collaborative spaces, for example, or people, their own My Documents or anything like that. It just adds kind of that layer on top that, as a records professional or an IT, gives you all those things you want to be able to do without having to tell the users how to do their work.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole brunt of the thing, isn't it? That we don't want to have to. In some cases, we want to leave it alone. I always remember a time, Troy. It's a bad experience I had probably 10 or 15 years ago now. Oh, for sure, 15 years ago now, where I had a senior director of communications. This was, and it was a she, and she said to me, I said, "I'm here to show you the new classification system for your organization," and she went, "No," and I went, "What do you mean, no?" No, we've got this new wonderful classification system that we've created in our records management area. And she went, "No, if the CEO walks into my office and asks me for something, I will not know where to find it. So leave me alone, basically, and get out of my office." So we had those kind of holdout pockets of people that were, holding down progress to getting the whole thing done. Anyway, so this could definitely eliminate all of that kind of issue that people are having with that whole idea.
Yeah, and the other thing that came up, you're talking about somebody and their content. One of the things that often comes out as well is when people leave organizations, this, especially when we look at email next week, this will be very relevant for people's old email boxes. But the idea that,
Right.
hey, Troy leaves the company and I've been using a development folder on our NAS. Hey, I've got to do something with that. Maybe it's got to get archived. Maybe, maybe it is all transitory stuff. Maybe it's corporate IP, all that kind of stuff. Putting that stuff into a structure here, giving it a classification, and then what we see in the last part with moving it somewhere, this can also be a great way to do archival to help deal with people's content after they're done using it.
Yeah, I had a security professional speak to me about this kind of issue as well, with that whole idea of what's changed since the last time we looked at the shared drive, and that their side was what's been deleted off the shared drive since the last time we looked at it. And so it brought a security connotation in place, as well as to somebody that's responsible for making sure that negative things aren't happening in an infrastructure as well. So very interesting. No, I think that's great, Troy. That's really answers a lot of questions for me, for sure.
Yep.
The dedupe thing always comes up. Every time I've ever put an EDRMS system in, when we were gonna clean up a shared drive before that happened, everybody always said, what about dedupe? I don't want to just forklift all these documents over into an EDRMS system, because that would be silly. I want to clean this kind of mess up before we get started, and that includes, of course, dedupe.
Yeah,
that's great.
Exactly. Yep. Okay, so we've spent about a half an hour. I just want to take a kind of couple minutes. I kind of plugged next week's webinar here. Let me just grab a link for this here and throw it in chat. I'll also be sending an email around for everybody with the recording of this. When I get it, I'll upload it. I usually post it to our website and put it into a blog. But I put the link for next week's webinar. It'll be, again, focused on email. We'll look at email, we'll look at organizing, very similar to what we did today, but we'll go a little bit deeper into some of the data engine rule functionality, and add that to what we've already been building. So the link's in chat for that. Everyone will get an email with a link to the website. So I'll bring up our website here, just so people know. The past couple of weeks, I've been sending out links that basically will take you to a blog post that has the video of the recording. So this is last week's recording. But this is essentially where it's going to take you to. A couple of other quick things I just want to highlight on here. Haven't been talking about Whisper too much in sense of documentation. Just like we're doing these webinar series, we also do feature videos and process videos on our YouTube channel, as well as inline in our documentation that'll take you to particular pieces of our videos that are relevant to what you're looking at. So like the bulk update, and all of this is available from within the Whisper tool. So if I actually go to my functional view and I'm in the column editor, I can actually right click on something here and go filter type, and it'll take me to the documentation for that particular one. And this one, it's got a video on the auto expand feature. So I just kind of wanted to highlight this because it hasn't really come up in the past couple of webinars, but I think this is pretty important for those, especially if you already have Whisper. But if you don't, you can always come here. It's just a main menu item to kind of go through some of the other features and documentation and videos for it. Again, it's on our YouTube channel as well.
Thanks, Troy.
Yeah, and just one last thing, the actual product page for Whisper under our software one, we have Whisper's records inventory tool here. This is where you can come to, this is just the basic product page, access the past webinar series. This is also, if you are interested, you can request a demo from here and contact us directly through this, or you can email me or Rick directly. You can go through office@westernim.com or email us directly at troy.sawyer or rick.sterling@westernim.com. So just wanted to highlight this because it hasn't really come up in previous ones. And if you're looking to get some more information about Whisper, look at some more videos, past recordings, request a demo, this is kind of where to come. And this is where I will post and send everybody a link to the recording.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. That's great.
Great.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for being on the webinar today. It's wonderful that you could all spend the time to see not only what Troy did today, but some of the new features in the Whisper application as well in version 4. So wonderful to have everybody on today. Thank you, and look forward to the next one.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. See you next week.
Thanks.